So here's everything Diane Nguyen learned in Bojack Horseman. Diane is an extremely complex character, to the point where many on the internet are not fans of her, due to her journey full of emotional ups and downs across the series. But I firmly believe her to be an insanely relatable person who teaches the audience a great deal about accepting yourself, finding your place in this world, and the reality of mental illness and depression. I mean, the show is called Bojack Horseman, but really it centers around his relationship with Diane, and subsequently, her development and storylines are treated with, dare I say, equal importance. We spend a ton of time with Diane and get a really clear picture of her most prominent issues, and since she's developed really well across the series, there's a lot of lessons to take away from her arc that could be very beneficial to us as we go throughout our daily lives. The first huge lesson being that sometimes you're not always cut out for the big things that you dreamed of.
And that's when you realize that the book you've been writing in your head is never actually going to be a book. So you stop.
Diane always thought that she would become a huge, wildly influential journalist that would write about important issues across the globe, changing people's minds and helping the world improve in general in a majorly important and visible way. So when she receives the opportunity to go overseas to a war-torn country and report on a rescue operation, she immediately feels drawn to it, even though her husband has many reservations. Now, Diane does stay for a while in LA, but is always planning to go on the trip. She literally tells him that she needs to do this. She has to do something incredibly important and meaningful, and their marriage alone is not enough for her. However, when she eventually goes to Cordovia, she finds the reality to be much harsher than she anticipated. Sebastian St. Clair, the founder of the charity and the rescue mission, isn't as good of a person as she expected him to be, and is doing it largely for vanity. Not only this, but the people and children that she gets close to are often suddenly killed before she can even process it. She barely gets any sleep or respite from the atrocities being committed in this war. It's a very traumatic time for her, to say the least. One that really shakes her perception of what this work would entail and her entire direction in life, leading her to eventually abandon the endeavor and return to LA. But this is exemplified by the fact that when she returns, she feels utterly lost in the world. We get indications that she's still dreaming and consistently thinking about Kinko, one of the children she met abroad who tragically passed away, and the other crimes against humanity that she witnessed over in Cordovia. It's really fundamentally uprooted her worldview, and now that she's lost that large dream, she is adrift, with no lifeline to channel her damage into. I'll get more into that specific need later. And as the series moves on, she has to become more comfortable with seemingly less impactful work, tweeting for celebrities, writing for girl crews, although she does get to put her own spin on things, starting a video series exposing injustice and malpractice. I feel compelled to add that I think it's tough to define concretely what job is more impactful or does the most good. That's pretty subjective, and you never know how much you're helping someone else with what you do. But Diane learns that she doesn't necessarily have to go across the world to affect the change that she wants to see, to be able to spread some positivity, some good into the world, as she's always wanted to. It might not look as dramatic or exactly like she always thought it would, and hey, it's not like she's gonna become some sort of huge political figure with this web series, but she is doing effective journalism, which at the end of the day is always what she wanted. She is speaking on injustice and calling out issues wherever she can find them across America. She is still trying to improve society around her, this time in a way that she can emotionally handle. Just because it turns out you might not be cut out for exactly what you dreamed, it doesn't mean there's not something for you to find in that area or that industry. Don't be disheartened entirely because of failure. It's a natural part of life, and it certainly doesn't mean there is nothing for you out there. Maybe even something related to the original goal, something that can still bring you the fulfillment that you originally wished for. I believe this idea can also be applied to her book of essays. It's a similar dream to what she intended to do in Cordovia. idea that she would write something life-changing that would be able to save people around the world, little girls who needed the guidance like she did when she was a child. However, every time she sits down to try and actually write this book, she struggles with accessing her traumatic memories or dealing with the self-hate that can accompany those memories when they are brought back to the surface in such quick succession. It's extremely evident that while she definitely feels that she should be writing this novel, she doesn't have much passion for it, as opposed to Ivy Tran, Food Court Detective. Kind of just following a random train of thought, this incredibly endearing and creative children's mystery just pours out of her onto the page, like really easily. Plus, everyone who reads it absolutely loves it, finding a ton of joy within this piece that she wrote. It's easy to see how much she genuinely enjoys creating it. Diane, however, protests against this piece, saying that it's too trivial and not serious enough for what she intended to do with her writing originally. And when Princess Carolyn gets her hands on it and starts pushing to get it made, because PC can be a tad, or who am I kidding, extremely forthright, Diane only resists further, even though PC correctly assesses that she seems like she had an absolute blast writing this. Diane feels that she was destined to write this one book of essays, this treatise on her life, and considers the idea of writing this fiction series instead utterly beneath her. But Princess Carolyn tells her that it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. This series can do sort of the same thing you wanted with your book of essays, help young girls feel less alone. You just present it through a wildly different, and more lively, frankly, context. And you get to fulfill that wish in a completely separate way than you ever intended. One that you never even saw as being part of your future. It's so sweet when we see her do her signing, and we see her interacting with these young girls who love the book and have gotten a positive experience from reading it. Plus Diane's pride in the success of her novel. We also see how it can impact people in ways she didn't expect, like with Guy's son, her new stepson, Sonny. Weird to say, but I think it was grammatically correct. It really reinforces how beneficial this project was for her, and how it still achieves what she has dreamed of. She still gets that fulfillment that she was looking for helping people in the same situation as her when she was a kid feel less alone, feel like they are going to get through it and be okay. Albeit not in the extremely dramatic way that was initially part of the dream. Sometimes dreams change, and that's okay. Adjusting them to be more realistic, or as you learn more about yourself and what you want, is just a part of how life goes. Another crucial lesson that we receive from Diane's overall arc is the harsh realization that just because someone is good doesn't mean they're good for you.
Sometimes I feel like our marriage is like a Magic Eye poster.
I love those things.
I know, and it's messy. And at first glance, it doesn't seem to make any sense. And it's hard to figure out. But sometimes, if you squint at it just right, everything lines up, and it's the most perfect, beautiful, amazing thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I'm so tired of squinting.
After she broke up with Wayne, someone who is definitely more cynical and sees the world closer to how she sees it, or saw it at the beginning of the series, she found a relationship with someone exactly the opposite. Mr. Peanut Butter, a happy-go-lucky golden retriever who always seems to be upbeat, blissful, and confident. I don't think it's unreasonable for her to jump into this relationship and assume that because he seems to be a better person, things will work out more favorably, or he will change her for the better. We don't get much indication about them fighting or bickering all that much before they're actually engaged and married, save for that one time Diane ran out of the Halloween party back in 2009, but there they also very quickly made up. It isn't until they're very deep into the relationship that Diane begins to see the repeating cycle of Mr. Peanut Butter not listening to her or considering her wants and needs, even after promising to, over and over again. But I have to imagine that in the 5 years they were together before season 1, when they were engaged, she must have gotten at least some indication about this type of behavior, but perhaps not enough to not refuse his proposal. They were living together, after all, and the man has a party for like every occasion. But I don't want to blame her. Mr. Peanut Butter is a charismatic guy, and when he tells her he loves her, he means it. It's hard to admit when something just isn't a fit, especially when someone isn't outwardly terrible or abusive and consistently promises to listen the next time. He is generally a nice guy. And also, when you put so much work into a relationship, it can be hard to just walk away. It's a sunk cost. and all that. However, I truly do think that their relationship should have ended in after the party. Here, Mr. Peanut Butter admits that Diane is basically his whole world. He spends his entire day waiting for her to be home. But Diane wants to be away from him for an extended period of time to follow her dream of doing real good in the world. It's not really about Mr. Peanut Butter. She herself states that she needs more than just him. There's a real disconnect in what they are looking for in this relationship, and it shows itself clearly in this conflict specifically. However, they do continue trying to work through it, even after Mr. Peanut Butter learns that Diane has been hiding her return from Cordovia from him for several months. I think that it's very mature of both of them to commit to couples counseling and to really make a responsible effort to save their marriage, but ultimately, they are trying to make two incompatible pieces fit together, and they continually have the same problems as the seasons go on, like in Bojack Kills, when Diane doesn't think to call Mr. Peanut Butter back, and he becomes rather enraged at her lack of care for this relationship, as opposed to him staying up all night worrying about her. She wasn't even thinking about him. Or when Mr. Peanut Butter plows forward with his campaign for governor, ignoring all of Diane's wishes, concerns, and pleads to stop, eventually going really far and pitting them against one another. It isn't until this storyline in season 4 that she becomes exhausted enough of trying to make this relationship work that she is able to see that they are not ever going to have a stable life together. That is why she struggles so hard to enter their newly bought home with him. She realizes that as much as she thinks they could work, that Mr. Peanut Butter is a joy to be around, that she loves him and he does love her, it doesn't automatically mean they operate well as a unit. And they have fundamentally different priorities that divide them at several points throughout their marriage, like with the gubernatorial campaign and Diane's reporting of his unethical strategies, which drove a harsh wedge in between them all throughout this season. It's a very mature take on adult relationships, where it is fully possible to have love for one another, but sometimes there are just irreconcilable differences in your personas that make it impossible for you to be together, and it's not really anyone's fault. Yes, there were definitely flaws that they both discovered they had in this relationship that they also could definitely work on, but ultimately, at that point they were at in their lives, there was no saving this relationship. There was no getting this to work unless they separated and focused on themselves and learned to overcome those flaws on their own. And it doesn't mean that Mr. Peanut Butter is a monster, as many suggest, nor does it mean that Diane can't be in a committed relationship. It just means they didn't work. Simple as that. And Diane learned that whoever she looks for next in a partner definitely needs to be a good listener. That is key. And now she knows to look out for that trait to ensure that they are a better match for herself instead of someone who simply appears positive and happy. Because while that is great, there is more than just that. Another key lesson that we get from Diane's journey is that your mental illness is not a part of your personality.
You just flip over the nothing, and underneath there's more nothing. Then you flip over that nothing, and there's more nothing underneath that. So you just keep flipping over nothings all your life because you keep thinking under all that nothing, there's got to be something, but all you find is nothing. We're probably going to break up soon anyway. There's only so long before he gets tired of the real me.
The real you being...
Ta-da!
At the end of season 5, Diane describes herself as a dumpster fire, a large garbage barge, stating that she feels that way about herself all the time. She does not look highly upon herself or who she is, and thinks that the results of her mental illness are irreparable parts of her personality. She believes that she is meant to be unhappy all the time, that she will always complain, that she is never satisfied with her position, and that is simply how she was built, and she deserves it. And we see this reflected in how she treats herself throughout the series. She blames herself for nearly everything that doesn't turn out right, like with the situation in Cordovia. She faults herself for struggling to deal with the realities of the horrors there when there is absolutely nothing wrong with her for not being able to handle all of that and being appropriately appalled and shaken by what you see over there. I believe that's normal. But Diane focuses on the fact that she's not the person she thought she was, tearing down her confidence in herself and her personal opinion of her own personality for a long period of time after these events. She has a strong resistance to allowing herself to be happy or follow those joyous impulses because she doesn't think that she deserves it, doesn't even think it's possible for her. Like with Guy, initially. After they fight about whether or not Diane should move to Chicago and he accuses her of having an ideological objection to feeling good, she insists on going back to LA, stating to him at the train station that she can't have him be the only good thing in her life, even if he wants to make a good life for her there, as that's too much pressure. But after hearing from Bojack about choosing to act and reach for happiness instead of assuming there was only one way to be, she's able to make the jump and move to Chicago with Guy, correctly stating with the grilled cheese story that she can find something else anywhere. It doesn't have to be in LA, and yes, not wanting Guy to be the only thing in her life or her to be the only thing in his is very reasonable, but there's no reason that she or he can't find opportunities in Chicago to make more meaning for herself. Not to mention, Guy also has Sunny, so she will never be the only thing in his life. There's a point where she believes that the fact that she is still unhappy with her life after all of these decisions to try to find something under all of that nothing, as she describes in season 6, is just who she is. And that even that she has made that leap with Guy, there is nothing she can do to change that. Guy will eventually discover the true Diane and break up with her. She has always been this way, she believes, all the way back to when she was live journaling in high school. However, there is and has always been an explainable medical reason she has felt this way, to an extreme degree. She has depression, and with the help of a psychiatrist and a very supportive and patient partner, she begins antidepressants, gradually becoming more and more positive and upbeat. She still has issues, of course, like any person, but she takes less of the weight of the world on her shoulders and allows herself to feel happy, allows herself to experience joy, to just let loose and have fun, something that she never really did previously because her brain was basically holding her hostage, forcing her to worry about every injustice everywhere in the world when it's not necessarily her responsibility to. She was always hell-bent on focusing what was wrong and what she isn't currently doing to fix it, rather than realistically understanding her place in the world and becoming comfortable with it, and the amount of control she is able to retain. She even mentions that she was previously put on Prozac, which is a popular antidepressant, and that it made her boring, so she didn't want to argue or protest or live journal anymore. She thought that her brooding, cynical, critical nature was just her, just part of being Diane, and it takes her a long time and a very supportive partner to help her learn that not only is that not all she is, but that those traits may have been exacerbated by a diagnosable illness this entire time. She might not be entirely a Zoe, as Wayne stated her to be in season 1. I think that simplification of people was generally incorrect anyway. Bojack helps her out by stating that he always assumed he was a thing that couldn't be changed, until someone showed him, Diane, that they believed he still could, that if he just chose to get some help, admit that he needs it, and believe things could be different for him, he actually could make them different. This conversation is what really pushes Diane, I believe, past that understanding of herself that she had internalized for decades, that belief that she is innately terrible, dissatisfied, that she will always complain no matter how good things appear to be for her, that she could never be just happy. A lot of that is finally let go when she makes the jump to recognize her own illness and get the treatment that she was prescribed. She's tired of feeling this way, as Bojack was, and makes the decision to put a stop to it, essentially. Not completely, like I said, it's not an auto fix, and I don't think the show really portrays it as one either, but it certainly helps her move in the right direction. One of the most important things that Diane learns is that sometimes damage doesn't have a reason.
If I don't write my book of essays now, I never will.
So, don't write your book of essays.
I have to.
Why?
Because if I don't, that means that all the damage I got isn't good damage. It's just damage. I have gotten nothing out of it, and all those years I was miserable was for nothing. I could have been happy this whole time, and written books about girl detectives, and been cheerful, and popular, and had good parents. Is that what you're saying? What was it all for?
I don't know, Diane.
It's not always to turn you into some tortured artist who changes the world or some massive political figure. It doesn't always have to have a reason. Things just happen, and you don't have to live up to some larger-than-life expectation simply because of what has occurred in the past. Diane has a strong desire to change the world that doesn't just come with simple ambition. Specifically in the episode Good Damage, when she struggles greatly with the aforementioned book of essays, as although it isn't right for her, as we've discussed, we learn that she feels she has to write it to make use of the trauma that she experienced as a child, because if it's not turned into good damage, then it was just damage. She has gotten nothing out of it, and there was no purpose to it. That being her childhood in a household with a very critical mother, a neglectful, often sexist father, and a set of extremely adversarial brothers with no sort of protection or concern for her actual safety. To her, if she isn't able to make this book of essays where her damage and all that upheaval from her past is depicted and directly utilized to help others in the same situation, it means that the trauma that she suffered was meaningless, that there was no reason to the Cryan situation. And that is a tough realization to come to. Listen, we want to believe that the universe works karmically, that everything happens for a reason, to make us stronger or teach us a specific lesson, but that simply isn't true. There's no reason that Diane was put through that horrible upbringing, save for the fact that she did not have great parents or supportive siblings. There was no driving force pushing her toward greatness by dipping her into pain first. And it's hard to admit that we live in such an, uncaring place that does not always punish the sinister or reward the victims or lift them up. But this show does a wonderful job depicting how the opposite mindset can be harmful to yourself. You might never be able to use your damage to create something or to effect some big change, and that is okay. That's not your job. Just because you've endured a harsh childhood or continued trauma, it doesn't mean you have to live up to some other insane, unattainable idea. You've already done more than enough to establish yourself as a strong, resilient person. You don't need to add more expectations and burdens onto yourself in addition to that. And if you try to force yourself to accomplish things that you don't truly want solely to make up for what occurred in the past, as Diane did, you'll only be making yourself more miserable in the long run. Now, it's important to clarify, Diane also learns that she might not be able to make her damage into good damage, but she hasn't gotten nothing out of it. She has learned important lessons about life that she could still share with others through this other medium that she had more fun writing. She can still accomplish that goal of helping others stuck in her previous position to feel less alone, or to help them through it, without necessarily detailing her trauma in specifics or diving too far deep into any of them. Again, I'm not really saying it can't be used, I'm just saying that you don't have to use it to become some insanely famous or influential figure. You can certainly learn a lot from it. I just think it's important to steer people away from the mentality of what happened to me was purposeful and good because it made me insert positive trait here. Of course, you can certainly recognize how your past has led you to become the person you are today, including the parts you love about yourself, but I think it's a mistake to attribute it to the trauma that we might have experienced rather than congratulate ourselves for developing as such. I just believe that it ventures a bit too far into the abuse is necessary territory, that discussion, or can lead people into those types of thoughts that might end up perpetuating this behavior, like, oh, this is fine because I'm making my child stronger or teaching them about how harsh reality is. No, it's not fine, it's not ever fine, and it is never a good thing that anybody suffers through abuse, ever. That is the main point that I am trying to drive home. There are things we can learn from it, and perhaps parts of ourselves that might become stronger because of it, but it is certainly not something to ever declare as good. There is no good damage. The last lesson I'd like to discuss from Diane's arc comes right at the end, when she learns that you can't necessarily save everyone, and that isn't your responsibility either.
I'm glad I lived in LA, but I am not nostalgic for it. I'm glad I knew Mr. Peanut Butter, even though he's not in my life anymore.
Yeah?
I think there are people that help you become the person that you end up being, and you can be grateful for them, even if they were never meant to be in your life forever. I'm glad I knew you too.
New, huh? Hey, wouldn't it be funny if this night was the last time we ever talked to each other?
Like I said earlier, this series largely focuses on Diane and Bojack's relationship, and their overarching development is undeniably tied to one another. They use this relationship as a major through line for the entire series. The pilot takes place right when they first meet, and in the finale, Diane essentially tells Bojack that they won't ever see each other again. Because you see, when Bojack and her first began, he saw her as the person that would fix him, even making a move on her at one point, believing that he was in love through these feelings, when really it was just him trying to look for an out. And even after he moves past that, Diane is still the person that he always looks to for guidance, to tell him right from wrong, to hold him accountable, as he puts it. But through their close proximity, over and over again, Bojack ends up hurting Diane, ignoring her, frightening her, apologizing afterwards for the harsh words that he hurled toward her or his general behavior and addictions, but then only going back and doing it all over again. But Diane really tries to stick by him for a lot of it, even at the end of season 5, when she and Bojack are on probably the worst terms they have ever been on after she learned the truth about what happened in New Mexico, and Bojack lied about it to her for so long. She still wants to help him to be better, and still guides him to rehab in the hopes that he can improve, because she still considers them to be friends at the end of the day, even if he has said some unforgivable things to her. She compares him to a friend from high school who also betrayed Diane, turned on her when she became popular, but she still went to her side when she needed her, because at the end of the day, they were still friends. But what would happen if that friend betrayed her again and again? How much could Diane continue to come by her side if over and over she was hurt? The huge turning point for them comes in season 6, where Bojack genuinely begins to improve. Diane basically asks his permission to move to Chicago with Guy, saying that she couldn't really leave him if she knew that he wasn't there yet, that he wouldn't be alright on his own, that he could take care of himself, essentially. And shortly after, when Bojack's life spirals downward once again and he relapses, he leaves a certain voicemail. He threatens to take his own life if she doesn't call back. He tells her that she needs to say she cares about him, or else he's going to assume that she doesn't. All after he promised her that he would be okay. And Diane, of course, because she cares about him, is sent into a panic where she can't reach Bojack, she couldn't get a hold of any of his friends, and was just profusely worried that he had committed suicide and that it had been her fault for leaving him behind, for believing him when he told her that he was alright, for not somehow knowing to answer his call or call him back immediately. I can't imagine how terrified she was, and for such a long period of time too, after she had finally reached this place of complacency in her life. Seriously, it cannot be understated, especially for the people who don't believe Diane should have left Bojack, how traumatic this period of time could be, how much turmoil she must have experienced in those hours where she couldn't get in touch with anyone. Like, it is properly exhausting emotionally, and something that she can't ever risk going through again, otherwise it might destroy her, take her down even further. It's for her own safety, and I really hope people who blame her for leaving can understand that. And due to that, her confidence in herself is once again shaken. That doubt about her deserving to be happy, about her being able to change for the better, all resurfaces with a fury and causes Diane to decide not to move to Houston with Guy, especially since a lot of her development forward was tied into advice that Bojack had learned on his own journey of rehabilitation. When Diane sees that he has slid back so viscerally, it causes her to think, well, that must mean that I'm not capable of change either. He was full of it. Kind of. Not, so explicitly, but still. I think it leads her to not make that leap again for him. This relationship that had made her more happy than she had perhaps ever been for a really long time. Thankfully, she's able to find the courage once again and move to Houston after the long distance almost destroys the relationship, not wanting to compromise by losing Guy permanently. But I think this period helps her to realize how damaging holding up this friendship with Bojack is, how emotionally taxing it can be for her to feel responsible for his safety, his feeling supportive, or his emotional state, for him to be able to call her and drop these bombs at a moment's notice, even though he can be a wonderful person and has helped her to improve her life in the past, he almost inadvertently destroyed all of that progress in one fell swoop. You have to know when to call it quits for yourself and for your own health. I've had quite a few people in the comments call this selfish, framing it as abandoning the other person, not trying hard enough, etc., etc. But this could not be further from the truth. I think there's a really strong resistance to emotional maturity like this recently in this day and age, where recognizing when someone's behavior is in fact abusive or not healthy for you is seen as being overly sensitive or woke, quite honestly. Most likely as a resistance to the growing education on mental illness and behavioral problems. People just love being the contrarian. But I really want to convey as much as I can that there is nothing wrong with saying goodbye to a friendship or a relationship that is directly causing you harm. It's alright to feel sorrow for the end of the relationship, of course, but there is no reason for you to feel guilty, no matter what anyone says. In my opinion, it's the same as, like, avoiding foods that you're allergic to, because mental health is just as important as physical health. If someone over and over again promises to do better, promises to be supportive of you, promises to be a friend, and then consistently ends up taking you down, disrespecting you, or straight up causing you distress, there is no reason for you to stay in that relationship, no matter how sorry they proclaim to be afterwards. I'm all for second chances, third, fourth chances even, but when I give you chances over and over and you continually let me down, leave me to feel worse, or even cause me panic attacks, I'm going to have to say goodbye. And I wouldn't consider it abandoning either, because first of all, Diane was incredibly respectful about it. She made sure to have one last long conversation with Bojack about her feelings and express all that he meant to her, despite insinuating that they would no longer remain actual friends. And also did the duty of informing him the exact reason why this needed to happen, so he didn't have to always wonder and overthink, hopefully. She said goodbye and even thanked him for what he's done for her, leaving on a rather positive note so that Bojack doesn't spiral down due to a depressing or tragic end. It's actually extremely considerate when you think about it. But I would never blame Diane for deciding that this relationship was too much for her to handle. She has to take care of herself, her own relationships, and what has led her to the good life that she has now. And it makes perfect sense to me, and I think is a very important lesson for all of us to learn. And to not feel guilty about deciding to do, because really a lot of people do. They blame themselves, and a lot of people on the internet will hound you saying that, you know, you're a bad friend or things like that, but it just couldn't be further from the truth. This is an extremely important lesson about taking care of your own mental health, being able to responsibly walk away and respectfully say goodbye. This is a very mature conversation from both sides, because Bojack doesn't break down pleading her to stay this time. I think that's a good sign that he's changed a lot too. But either way, I do think it's important for us to know. But that is everything that I think Diane learned across the series. Quite a bit of great lessons that we get from her arc, and as always, I think she is a fantastic character that is way too overhated on the internet, and her story provides a ton of good lessons that we could take into our daily lives to help us find fulfillment, something that makes us happy. And I think that's something that every human can relate to. But if you enjoyed this video, consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/PosiTVty. That's PosiTVty. There you get all these videos before they come out on YouTube. You get to choose whatever you want to see on the channel, and you get the essays unedited so you can hear all of my mistakes and perhaps the things I choose to edit out of the final cut. But I appreciate all the support you guys give me on YouTube as well. Seriously, every view, like, comment, subscriber means a lot to me. I'm just completely in awe that I actually get to do this as a job. It's like my favorite. I love it so much. And let me know what you would like to see next, because I'm always open to suggestions. I will see you for whatever the next video happens to be, and I hope you're having a wonderful week. Have a good day. Bye.